What's up? How you doing? Here we are. Beautiful night tonight. Beautiful. I don't even feel a breeze. Very comfortable. Fresh cup of Lipton tea. Delicious. That's delicious. Good stuff. Wow, that's fit for a king. I'm not the king of Managua, but this is worthy of a king. Wow. So today, nice day, but I was thinking of Maggie. Maggie Letvin. Letvin. Anybody know who that is? So when I was a kid, I was a big fan of PBS, Public Broadcasting System, or Service, probably System. And there was a show on there. It was Maggie's Magic Machine or Maggie's Beautiful Machine, I think, something like that. And it was a lady who was probably early 40s, and she would show people how to do aerobics, is what I think it was back then. They might have called it something else, but so they were in a room, and it was like 70s looking people because it was in the 70s, and she would show them how to do exercises. And that is the first place where I learned the word. There's a mosquito. That was the first place I had heard the word exhale and the word inhale. So when I hear those words, it reminds me of her because she taught them to me. So I think I was the only kid that watched that. You know, most kids my age, they watched Sesame Street back then and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, things like that, the Electric Company. I watched those too, but I also watched Maggie. And she had a very unique voice, I don't know if it was very unique, but it was unique. Had bangs, long hair, and she would do running in motion, and I would do the same thing in my house watching that. So many years went by, and I was in a field some years ago. I don't know, it was like 10 years ago, something like that. It's on my channel, you could look it up. But I made a comment about whatever happened to Maggie Letvin from PBS. And her granddaughter sent me an email, a text, a message. And she said, "That's my grandmother." And then after that, about, I don't know, a couple of weeks after that, I started noticing a channel went up. It was Maggie, and they were showing old clips from the old show. And then I was on Facebook very briefly, and I found her. She was on Facebook, and we started chatting back and forth. You know, every couple of weeks, couple of months, we'd send messages to each other, and I felt the connection with her because she was kind of like an idol of mine as a kid. You know, I loved watching her work out, and so sadly, I found out a couple of days ago that she had died a couple of years ago. They didn't post it on Wikipedia. You know, it shows that, her date of birth, but it doesn't show that she had died. But then the other day I looked up, even beyond that, and I saw that she had died a couple of years ago, if it's accurate. Maybe it's more, I don't know. But I really was happy that I was able to communicate with her. Because back then as a kid, I wanted to meet all these people on PBS. So I am a fan. I was a fan. I still am a fan of Maggie's. Matter of fact, a few years ago I bought her book, The Beautiful Machine or whatever, big thing like that. It separates. But yeah, so for many years before the internet was popular, I was always wondering about her. I said, whatever happened to that lady who taught like exercise? And one time I asked her, I go, who are those people that you had on your show doing exercise? Because to me they were always different looking people. It was not the same people. And she said it was a group from MIT. And so yeah, it was like I was little and I was all fascinated with that stuff. Um, but yeah, she was like 98 years old. I remember when she turned 94 or something, she said, "Can you believe it? I'm 94." I mean, I go, "No, I can't." I said to her, "I remember you as being, young and everything, and you know, that's life, day by day, a little bit older." But I used to watch all those. Those were more for adults. But I was that little kid that would watch PBS all day until it went off the air. And my favorite thing about PBS was the bumper music in between shows. It was like, not jazzy really, but it was like a bit of a flute thing going there. And I loved those. I wish I had a collection of them. So I would sit there and, I'd like say, I don't know, Maggie was coming on at 2. I would be there a couple of minutes before 2, and I would hear the bumper music. There was always some kid lying down like this on the rug, cartoon, waiting for the TV to bring on the show while they played that music. Other times they had some magical, like dust. I think I got it, but I'm not sure. So yeah, sad, but she lived a long life, and so did her husband. I think his name was Jerry Letvin, and he died, a few years, like a decade ago. But he was up there too in age. So taught at MIT. Wow, I could smell. You know what I smell right now? Barbecue. I can smell barbecue. Somebody's cooking steaks. But yeah, I was a big time. They used to call it the Children's Television Workshop. I don't think it's called that anymore. But yeah, PBS, I loved it. I loved everything about it back then. Now, by today's standards, it's a little bit cheap looking. But yeah, somebody is cooking heavy duty. I'm gonna go over there and grab some steak. So anyway, yeah, I remember Fred Rogers was one of my favorites. Loved that Mr. Rogers Neighborhood. I loved the opening, where they would have the camera and you'd see the little model city or town that he was from. And I was always, as a kid, watching and saying, "Where? I don't see him walking though. Where is he?" Even though it's miniature fake houses. But I loved that neighborhood. It was cozy. It looked like there was no crime there. And then it would pan into that Mr. Rogers house, and he would swing the door back and sing his little tune. Do the cardigan sweater, change with the zipper, and change your shoes. Grab it. But yeah, and there was an innocence about him. I mean, I don't know if he was gullible in real life, but he did have that childlike innocence to him. And I used to watch that a lot. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Loved the neighborhood. Loved the people that were in that neighborhood. That Chef Brockett and what was that guy, Johnny Costa? Remember there was a guy, he played piano. He was a real famous jazz musician. And somehow Fred Rogers convinced him to be the guy that played the piano at the beginning, and during the end of the show. And then Fred would sing. Every once in a while they'd do like a special and they'd pan over to him and they'd show him. They'd show him on that piano playing. And I liked that house. I thought the house was very cozy. I always thought when I was a kid, I didn't know, but I thought that he had 2 houses, one with his family, and his wife, and then when she would get on his nerves or something, they would get into an argument, he would leave and go to the other house where nobody knew about it. It was just like his secret house. That's what I thought was going on, because I couldn't explain why he would show up there for a half hour and then leave again. I felt like that house was like his cooling off place. You know, he would kind of go there, get his nerves down, and then go back home. And nobody knew about that house. That's what I thought. And I really thought that. So I had a dream a few times that I found the house. I broke in, and he wasn't there. And I started messing around with everything, feeding the fish, extra food in there, picture, messing with that. The other thing I did is I summoned trolley. There was the switches underneath by the that couch thing that he would sit on, and I hit the button, trolley came. And then I let him go, let the trolley go, and I got on the tracks and I crawled like a bear into the neighborhood of make-believe. And when I got there, I was able to go into the castle where King Friday the 13th lived, with Prince Tuesday and Sarah, and I was back there and I was exploring. It was so fun. And then I went into the merry-go-round, museum go-round, with Lady Elaine Fairchild, and I was having a blast there. And then I said, I gotta get out of here now before Fred gets home. And I got back on the tracks and I crawled back to his house and I left. Had that dream. Made my father try and locate Sesame Street one time. Yeah, so one time, it was me and my father. I was little. I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I said, you know, because he knew Sesame Street, right? I said, can we find that? And my father literally went around in town, round and around, and every once in a while he would stop. I don't know if he would actually ask these people that question, but he would get out. I would say, why don't you ask them where it is? And I don't know if he got out and said, hey, you guys know how to get to Sesame Street? So then he'd get in the car and we'd continue driving. I think he was just acting. I think he was doing that to, you know, make me happy. But I don't think he was actually asking for directions. But yeah, I actually had a dream one time where I went inside Oscar's trash can and it was huge. You know, outside it looks like, you know, whatever, but when I got in there, it was room after room. It was pitch black. I remember there was a swimming pool, and I passed it. And then I ended up at Gordon's apartment with Susan, his wife. I went in there, and I hung around with them in the kitchen, visited Erton and Bernie, who live on, I think, on the top floor, on the bottom floor. I think they live on the bottom floor. Yeah. I went to Louise's Fix-It Shop. Loved that place. He always had something he was working on, like a radio. Nowadays, if a radio breaks, you toss it, you buy a brand new one. You don't fix the old one anymore. It's disposable. Delicious. But yeah, I made my father look around and look around. And we were driving and driving. My father was trying to find Sesame Street. If we knew what we know now, we would have driven to Estonia at the studio there and taken a tour. That would be something I would love to go. And even now, I would love to go and take a tour of Sesame Street. I was a fan of that show when Mr. Hooper was on, way back. And then there was a guy, David, I think his name was, who suffered a mental breakdown or something, and he was driving through the streets in real life. Cops had to, you know, chase him. They caught him. I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know whatever happened to him. And then Maria. Loved Maria there. She lived in the back. She was like the cool, you know, young girl that lived near Sesame Street on the backside. Who else was on there? Big Bird. Big Bird had a nest next to the apartment. Yeah, there was a few shows I'd watched. The Electric Company. The Electric Company was for slightly older kids. I loved The Electric Company. Morgan Freeman was on that. and they had cool. That was full of cool stuff. Letterman was on there, Spellbinder, Spider-Man, Jennifer of the Jungle with the gorilla there. She was on. That was named Paul, I think. I think it was Paul. Easy Reader. Trying to think, then they had that plant that would talk. That bald guy, was there. Plant would talk, and then they had the silhouettes, like shh, and then and then they'd pronounce it together, help you learn how to read, and then they taught about conjunctions and all kind of things. That was the more complete. I liked Sesame Street, but that was, the Electron was even better for me. LAPD again doing the rounds. I have no idea where they're going. They're going somewhere. A song that I liked, and I think it was on Sesame Street. It was like a couple of versions of it. Everybody Eats was the song, and then Everybody Sleeps. Had a really cool little melody to it. Little hypnotic voice singing the lyrics. Then I liked that guy, the unknown painter guy there, that I'm gonna paint the 9, and the street cleaner would go by, clean the street, and then he would come by and draw the 9, or draw. I remember there was a guy in a pool, bald guy, and he went and painted a number on his bald head, and that guy eventually became Mr. Bentley on the Jeffersons. Mr. Bentley, who wasn't even from England. But so many things I remember. It's like it was such a rich time to be a kid, and I mean every kid probably feels that way about their time. But for us it was true. It was true. The 50s seems like a nice time, to grow up. Very, very, I don't want to say there was no crime. There was crime. They presented no crime on the TV shows. It was just like a cool time, The greases were around. You had the hair with the grease combed to the back. There were things going on. Korean War was going on during the 50s. All that stuff. Suez Canal crisis. But then 64 and back looked like the 50s. Then after the Beatles came, 64 and on looked different. It looked like the typical 60s we think about when we mention the 60s. Laverne and Shirley, I remember that was kind of like early 60s type show. It was a cool time. And, I mention this a lot, but those years people wore hats. I don't know what happened to the hat thing after that. Who decided no more hats anymore? I said, listen, from this day forward, we're not going to wear any hats. Now, yeah, you see hats. What do you see? Baseball caps, things like that. But you don't see the fancy fedoras, derbies, things like that. You don't see that anymore. You can't have the same style forever. Sometimes I watch these remastered videos or films from World War II and before. Some of them are from the 20s, like Manhattan, 1923 or whatever. And you see everybody's got a hat on. Different time. Need a time machine to go back and see all that. But I would do that. I would go and check out those days. But yeah, Maggie Letvin. I would say I was one of her biggest fans. I was probably the 1% of the 1%. Loved that show. I don't think I missed an episode. I was always, I gotta watch Maggie. And who else was on? It was Fred Rogers. Oh, Zoom. I loved Zoom. How could I forget Zoom? Zoom was awesome. Zoom, 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 Zoom. They had the opening theme with the kids running with the striped shirts. And then they would tell you, if you want to talk like us, they would talk like Chubby Frubby Wubby Dubby. And you can send a self-addressed stamped envelope to this address, box 02131, send it to Zoom. And you would send it to them, and they would send you a card how to talk Chubby Frubby Wubby Dubby. But it was a cool show. And I don't know what those kids are doing these days. They're probably all old with a cane, but they had a sheet in one of them. That's how I learned how to do that boy thing. So it's B-O-Y, and then you connect the Y to the B top, the bottom, to do the eyes there, and then a smile. And from the word boy, you get a boy-looking picture. So that's it. That's it for tonight. Time to get some sleep. It's like a time machine. Here I am again. I should splice all the evenings when I'm out here talking and put a medley of, here I am again. And, it literally is like time travel. Once you get here, it's like nothing existed before. Boom, boom, boom. Instantly, here we are again. Good tea. Appreciate that tea. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.